The chains around Captain Aaron Vale's wrists were not cold. They were warm, almost alive, as if the alien metal was studying him while it held him down, and that thought alone made the silence in the throne room feel even heavier. The human fleet was gone, destroyed in less than an hour, Earth's proud defense reduced to drifting fire and broken steel. And now the last surviving commander of that fleet knelt on a black glass floor inside the heart of the enemy flagship, surrounded by beings who did not blink, did not whisper, and did not see him as an equal. Above him the ceiling curved like the inside of a giant shell, glowing with soft blue light, and at the far end of the hall a throne rose from the floor like a blade made of crystal, carved with symbols from a language older than humanity's first cities. The alien king sat there in silence, tall and still, his armor shining like liquid silver. But it was not the king who made Aaron's pulse slow and heavy. It was the figure. Descending the steps beside him, the alien princess moved with calm confidence, her long white cloak trailing behind her, her eyes bright like distant stars. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She studied the human as if he were a rare object brought from a far world. The guards tightened their grip on their weapons, expecting fear, begging for it. But Aaron did not lower his head. He did not beg. He simply looked back. And that small act of defiance caused a ripple through the hall. The princess stopped only a step away from him, close enough for him to see the thin lines of light moving across her skin like living patterns, close enough to hear her slow breath. And then she leaned in, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. "My children will have your blood, human." The words did not sound like a threat. They sounded like a decision already made. And for a second, even the alien king shifted in surprise. The guards looked at each other, confused. The human prisoner blinked once, trying to understand what he had just heard. He had expected execution, torture, humiliation, but not this. Not a claim that tied his future to the royal bloodline of the empire that had just crushed his people. The king's deep voice echoed through the chamber, asking his daughter to explain herself. But she did not look away from the human. She circled him slowly, studying his face, his posture, the way he controlled his breathing despite the chains and the loss and the silence. She spoke calmly about survival, about strength that was not measured in ships or weapons, but in endurance. She spoke of humans who fought even when defeat was certain, who adapted to new worlds, who survived harsh climates, who rebuilt after disasters. She spoke of a species that refused to stay down. The court listened, some in interest, others in anger. To them, humans were a small, loud race from a young star system, not worthy of royal attention. But the princess continued, explaining that her scientists had studied, captured human data for years, that human blood carried something rare, something flexible, something that changed quickly under pressure. She called it the spark of adaptation, and she claimed that the future rulers of the empire would need that spark. The king warned her that mixing bloodlines was dangerous, that the nobles would resist, that tradition mattered. But she replied that tradition would not save them from the next war. And her eyes briefly flicked toward Aaron again, as if she could already see a future no one else could. Aaron listened carefully, saying nothing, his mind racing. He realized he was not just a prisoner. He was a symbol, a tool in a much larger plan. And yet something in the princess's voice did not feel cruel. It felt strategic, almost respectful. The hall grew quiet again as the king finally declared that the human would not be executed. Instead, he would be placed under royal custody, studied, protected, and prepared. Gasps and low murmurs filled the chamber, some nobles clearly furious, others afraid of what this meant for the empire's future. The guards pulled Aaron to his feet, not roughly this time, but firmly, and as they led him away from the throne room, he felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes on his back. He did not know if this path would lead to power, to betrayal, or to death, but he understood one thing clearly. Earth had lost the battle, yet somehow he had become more valuable alive than dead. And that made him dangerous in a way the aliens had not planned. As the massive doors of the throne hall closed behind him, the princess watched in silence, her expression unreadable. The Empire believed it had captured a defeated human commander, but she believed she had just secured the future of her bloodline, and perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. If you enjoy strong HFY sci-fi stories like this, gently consider subscribing to the channel to support more epic adventures, because this was only the beginning, and far above the war-torn ruins of Earth's fleet, inside the most powerful ship in the alien empire, a single human heartbeat echoed through royal corridors that had never before carried the sound of human blood, and somewhere deep within those living walls, something ancient seemed to awaken in response to it. Watching, waiting, calculating what this impossible union might bring next. Captain Aaron Vale was not taken to a prison cell. Instead, he was escorted through corridors that curved like the inside of a living creature, the walls glowing softly as if they were aware of his presence. The guards no longer treated him like a condemned soldier, but like a rare specimen that could not be damaged, and that change alone told him how serious the princess had been. He was placed inside a vast chamber with transparent walls that revealed the endless stretch of space outside, stars burning silently against the darkness. And for the first time since the battle, he allowed himself a slow breath, not of relief, but of calculation, because survival for a human did not begin with strength. It began with understanding. Hours later, the doors opened without sound, and the alien princess entered alone, without guards, without weapons, which was either a sign of confidence or a test. Her silver eyes studied him carefully, as if she were reading lines of data written across his skin. She did not waste time with threats or kindness. She simply activated a floating display between them. Symbols shifting into a form he could almost recognize. Images appeared, human soldiers fighting in extreme cold, human miners surviving radiation storms, human children adapting to new gravity environments on distant colonies. And then charts followed, showing something the aliens had measured for years. Human DNA did not stay stable under stress. It shifted, not randomly, but with purpose. Small changes triggered by danger, by climate, by fear, by hope. She explained in calm, simple words that most species in the galaxy were designed for balance. They thrived in stable systems, but struggled in chaos. Humans were different. Humans grew stronger in chaos. They rebuilt faster after collapse. They learned from defeat instead of surrendering to it. And that difference made them unpredictable. The alien empire valued power and control, but it feared unpredictability because unpredictability could not be calculated. Aaron listened without speaking, though inside his mind questions formed rapidly. If the Empire knew this about humans, why attack Earth so aggressively? Why risk pushing such a species into desperation? The princess seemed to sense the unspoken challenge into silence. She admitted that the invasion had not been her choice. The council believed crushing humanity early would prevent a future threat, but she believed suppression would only accelerate. Human evolution, pressure would refine them, not erase them. She stepped closer, explaining that her scientists had tried to isolate the human adaptability trait. They had tested blood samples, simulated human stress environments, even cloned tissue samples, but the trait weakened outside a living human system. It required the full human biological network, mind and body together. Fear and determination combined. It could not be copied in a lab, and that was why she had made her decision in the throne room. She wanted heirs who carried that living adaptability, heirs who could rule an empire that faced unknown threats beyond known space. Because even the alien empire, powerful as it was, had detected signals from distant galaxies that suggested something older and more dangerous was moving closer, something that had already erased other civilizations. And for the first time, a thin crack appeared in her calm expression. Not fear exactly, but urgency. Aaron realized then that he was not simply part of a political gamble. He was part of a survival strategy for an empire that feared a greater enemy. But before he could respond, the chamber lights dimmed suddenly, a silent alarm flashing across the walls. The princess turned sharply toward the door as an alien officer rushed in, whispering rapid updates in their language, though Aaron caught enough to understand one thing clearly. Several noble houses had filed a formal protest against the princess's decision, and more than that, a secret council had begun meeting without the king's knowledge. discussing the removal of the human variable before it could destabilize the Empire. The officer's final words were colder than the rest. There were rumors of a planned extraction, not to rescue Aaron, but to eliminate him quietly and blame it on human biological weakness. The princess dismissed the officer and stood silent for a moment, thinking, and then she looked at Aaron not as a specimen, but as an ally who did not yet know he was one. She admitted that bringing him here had accelerated internal resistance. The nobles feared hybrid blood would shift power away from ancient houses. They feared change more than extinction, and that fear made them dangerous. Aaron finally spoke, his voice steady, telling her that humans had a saying that the most dangerous enemy was the one who smiled at you while sharpening a blade behind your back. She seemed to understand the meaning even if the words were foreign, and for the first time there was the smallest hint of respect in her gaze. But the tension in the room did not fade because somewhere within the massive warship, doors were closing that should not have been closing, and life support readings flickered in distant sectors, subtle changes that only someone watching closely would notice. Aaron's instincts sharpened, battle instincts that had kept him alive when fleets burned around him. He stepped closer to the transparent wall, scanning reflections rather than stars, and he saw movement behind the princess that did not belong to her guards, shadows shifting too precisely to be random. And in that moment, he understood something else about alien politics. The Empire feared human blood for what it might become, but some within it feared it enough to kill for it. And as the chamber lights flickered once more before stabilizing, both the human and the princess realized that the truth about human blood was no longer a scientific theory or a royal experiment. It had become the center of a silent war inside the most powerful empire in the galaxy. And someone had just made the first move. The summons to the royal court arrived sooner than expected, and it was not framed as a request, but as a command. Captain Aaron Vale was escorted once again through the glowing corridors of the flagship. Yet this time the air felt different, heavier, charged with quiet hostility that even a human could sense. The Court of Enemies, as some whispered it was called, was not merely a hall of advisors, but a battlefield without weapons drawn, a place where power shifted with words and silence killed. Faster than blades, the chamber was vast and circular, layered with rising platforms where alien nobles stood draped in armor and fabrics that shimmered with their house symbols, their eyes following Aaron as he was brought to the center, unchained but surrounded, a statement in itself. Above them, all the alien king watched from his throne, and beside him stood the princess, calm as ever, though Aaron noticed her fingers tighten slightly behind her back, a sign she knew this would not be simple. The first noble to step forward was tall and thin, his skin marked with dark patterns that moved like smoke. He spoke loudly in the imperial tongue before switching to a translated form so the human could understand. He called Aaron an animal elevated beyond his station, a war prisoner dressed in clean fabric instead of chains, and accused the princess of endangering pure bloodlines for the sake of curiosity. Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber like wind across dry leaves, but others watched in silence, measuring reactions rather than joining them. The princess answered with controlled patience, explaining again that evolution was not betrayal, that strength did not come from isolation but from growth. Yet the nobles were not convinced. They began projecting data across the chamber, statistics of alien supremacy, centuries of dominance, fleets undefeated until humanity's brief resistance forced them to notice the species at all. They mocked human fragility, pointing out shorter lifespans, internal conflicts, emotional instability. They displayed images of Earth cities burning during the invasion, suggesting this was proof of weakness. Aaron remained silent, absorbing every insult, every glance, every hidden alliance forming across the room, because humans survived not by reacting to every attack, but by choosing the right moment. Another noble spoke, this one older, his voice softer but more dangerous. He revealed intercepted human transmissions from outer colonies that had not yet surrendered, evidence that human forces were regrouping rather than collapsing. He argued that keeping Aaron alive could inspire resistance, that his existence inside the royal family might become a symbol of human defiance rather than submission. The tension rose as several houses began to argue openly, some fearing rebellion, others fearing stagnation, and beneath it all, Aaron saw something clear. The alien empire was not united. It was balanced on agreements and fear. Just as many human empires had been before their own collapses. Then the unexpected happened. The princess ordered Aaron to speak, a bold move that shocked even the king. The chamber quieted instantly, hundreds of alien eyes fixed on the human commander, waiting for arrogance, for pleading, for some display that would confirm their prejudice. Aaron stepped forward slowly, his voice calm and steady. He did not beg for mercy. He did not insult them in return. Instead, he told them a simple truth, that humans were weak compared to them in strength and technology. The humans fought each other too often. The humans made mistakes again and again. But he added that every mistake taught them something. Every defeat changed them. Every loss forced them to become harder to destroy. He explained that crushing Earth might have delayed humanity, but it would not erase it because humans did not require victory to continue. They required only survival, and survival was something they understood. Deeply, the nobles reacted with mixed anger and discomfort, because confidence without arrogance was harder to dismiss. The older noble attempted to interrupt, but before he could continue, the chamber lights dimmed briefly, a system disturbance rippling through the ship, subtle but noticeable. Aaron saw several nobles exchange quick glances, coded signals passing between them through small flickers of light in their armor. And he understood instantly that the protest was not only verbal, it was coordinated. Something was already in motion beyond this chamber. The princess sensed it as well, her gaze sharpening as she ordered security reports. Yet the answers came delayed, fragmented, as if someone inside the command structure was slowing communication. The king rose slightly from his throne, demanding order. But the room was no longer stable ground. Accusations began flying between houses, one blaming another for sabotage, another denying involvement. And through the chaos, Aaron noticed movement in the upper tiers, small devices being activated discreetly. Not weapons, but transmitters, sending signals beyond the flagship, perhaps to fleets loyal to certain nobles, perhaps to allies hidden in distant sectors. The court of enemies had moved beyond debate. It was preparing for action, and the human at the center had become the spark igniting long-buried rivalries. The princess stepped closer to Aaron, lowering her voice so only he could hear. She admitted that she had expected resistance, but not this speed, not this level of coordination. And Aaron quietly replied that when people feared losing power, they moved quickly and without patience, a lesson humanity had learned through countless revolutions. Suddenly, a sharp vibration ran through the chamber floor, stronger this time, followed by a faint tremor that rippled upward into the throne structure. Alarms began to flicker along the walls, but not the loud emergency kind. These were controlled, contained. Warnings, the kind meant to isolate damage without spreading panic. The older noble smiled slightly, too slightly, and Aaron's instincts flared because that smile was not fear, it was anticipation. Somewhere within the massive flagship, something had been triggered, not to destroy the ship entirely, but to destabilize it just enough to create confusion, to create opportunity. And in the rising noise of the court turning against itself, Captain Aaron Vale understood that the alien empire was not only debating his future, it was already fighting over it. And before this session ended, someone would attempt to remove him from the board permanently, not an open challenge, but in calculated silence. And as the tremors continued beneath their feet, the court of enemies revealed its true nature, not a place of law, but a place where survival belonged only to those who moved first. The tremor beneath the court floor did not feel like a system failure. It felt precise, controlled, as if someone had touched the ship's heart with careful fingers. And Captain Aaron Vale knew that whatever was happening was not meant to destroy the flagship. It was meant to create a small window of chaos, just enough for something deadly to move unseen. The nobles were still arguing loudly when the lights dimmed again, this time longer, shadows stretching across the chamber walls like living things. And in that brief darkness, Aaron heard it, a sound too soft for alien ears focused on their own voices. The faint click of magnetic locks disengaging from above. He reacted before he fully understood why. Years of battlefield survival, pushing his body forward without hesitation. He grabbed the alien princess by the arm and pulled her down just as a thin spear of condensed energy sliced through the space where her head had been a second earlier. The blast struck the crystalline throne. Behind them, shattering part of it into glowing shards, and the chamber exploded into chaos. Guards raised their weapons. Nobles screamed accusations. The king roared commands that were barely heard over the rising alarms. But Aaron's focus narrowed. He scanned the upper tiers and saw the assassin clearly for a split second. Not a common soldier, but a royal enforcer marked with the sigil of one of the protesting houses, positioned in a maintenance alcove that should have been sealed during court assembly, meaning this had been arranged long before the session began. Another shot fired, grazing Aaron's shoulder and burning through the fabric of his uniform. The pain sharp but manageable. He pushed the princess behind a fractured section of the throne and shouted for her guards to flank left instead of charging forward, because the assassin's angle suggested a secondary shooter waiting to catch anyone who moved directly. The alien guards hesitated only a fraction before obeying, surprised at themselves for taking tactical direction from a human. Their formation shifted just as a second energy beam erupted from a hidden balcony. Striking empty space where they would have stood, the nobles began scrambling for exits, but the exits sealed automatically as security protocols activated, trapping everyone inside. The assassin leapt from the alcove with unnatural agility, landing on one of the platforms and cutting down a guard with a blade of pure light. The room filled with flashes and screams. Yet through it all, Aaron noticed something strange. The assassin's movements were not meant for escape. They were meant to guarantee the princess's death, even at the cost of his own life, which meant someone believed her survival was a greater threat than open rebellion. Aaron moved again. Ignoring the burning in his shoulder, he grabbed a fallen alien weapon, its weight unfamiliar but balanced enough, and aimed not at the assassin, but at a glowing panel on the far wall, calculating quickly from what he had observed earlier about the ship's internal systems. He fired, and the shot overloaded the gravity stabilizer for the upper tiers, causing a sudden shift that pulled the assassin off balance mid-strike. The alien guards seized the moment, pinning him down in a storm of controlled energy blasts that left him barely alive but restrained. The chamber lights stabilized slowly, smoke and glowing dust drifting through the air. The king descended from his damaged throne with fury radiating from him, demanding to know which house had authorized such treason. But the assassin only laughed weakly, a cold, hollow sound, and declared that purity must be protected before biting down on a hidden capsule embedded in his jaw. Ending his life before interrogation could begin, silence fell heavier than before, heavier even than when Aaron first entered in chains. Because now the threat was no longer theoretical, it was proven. The princess rose slowly from behind the shattered throne, her cloak torn slightly, her expression no longer calm, but sharpened like a drawn blade. She looked at Aaron not as a subject or a specimen, but as the one who had just saved the heir of the empire in front of every rival house. The nobles who had mocked humanity now stood speechless, confronted with the fact that human reflex and human instinct had preserved their future ruler. Whispers spread rapidly. Not insults this time, but calculations, because political balance had shifted in a single violent minute. The king turned his gaze toward Aaron, measuring him differently now. And though he said nothing, the meaning was clear. The human was no longer merely tolerated. He had earned presence through action. Yet beneath the surface of victory, Aaron sensed something darker. This attempt had been bold, too bold for a single noble house acting alone. The assassin's position, the system interference, the sealed exits. It all required coordination inside Central Command, meaning someone closer to the throne had allowed this breach. Someone with access to royal protocols. As emergency crews repaired the chamber and security forces dragged away the assassin's body, Aaron leaned slightly toward the princess and spoke quietly. telling her that in human history, the first failed assassination often meant a second attempt would be smarter and harder to detect. Her eyes flicked toward him with recognition, understanding that this was only the opening strike of a deeper conflict. The court of enemies had revealed its willingness to spill royal blood to stop change, and now the Empire stood at a dangerous edge, because saving the princess had not ended the threat. It had raised the stakes, making Eren not just a symbol of adaptation, but a target whose survival could determine whether the Empire moved toward evolution or tore itself apart from within. And as fragments of the shattered throne were carried away, glimmering like broken stars across the dark floor, Captain Eren Vale realized that he had just stepped fully into an alien civil war, where the next attack would not be so loud, not so visible, and possibly not aimed at the princess at all. The official report called the assassination attempt an isolated act of extremism, a lone fanatic defending ancient tradition. But Captain Eren Vale knew better, and judging by the way the alien princess moved through the flagship in the days that followed, she knew it too. The corridors were quieter now, not peaceful, but watchful. Security patrols doubled, yet somehow felt thinner, as if loyalty itself had become uncertain. The shattered throne had been replaced with a temporary structure, less grand, more practical, a silent sign that stability was no longer guaranteed. Eren was relocated again, not to confinement, but to a secured wing adjacent to the Royal Command Center, officially for his protection, unofficially because the princess no longer trusted half the Empire's officers, and within those guarded halls the hidden war began to reveal itself. Not with explosions or fleet battles, but with data delays, misrouted commands, supply ships that arrived hours late, and encrypted transmissions that flickered briefly before vanishing. The Empire was still powerful from the outside. Its fleets still patrolled conquered systems. Its banners still flew over distant colonies. But inside, something was cracking. Noble houses that had once competed quietly were now forming silent alliances, pooling influence, testing boundaries, and every one of them had a position on the human question. Some wanted Eren dead immediately. Some wanted him traded to Earth as a message of dominance. And a few, surprisingly, saw opportunity in aligning with the princess's vision of evolution. The king attempted to project unity, but age and pressure weighed on him, and whispers circulated that his recent illness had not been natural. Eren overheard fragments of conversation between high-ranking officers, references to subtle toxins designed to weaken without obvious trace. And he began to understand that the Empire's instability went deeper than his arrival. He was not the cause of the hidden war. He was the catalyst that forced it into the open. One evening the princess entered his chamber without ceremony, dismissing her guards with a gesture that carried more trust than before. She stood beside the transparent wall overlooking space, stars reflecting in her eyes, and for the first time she spoke without royal distance. She admitted that her decision had been driven by more than science or strategy. Years ago, long before Earth was invaded, long before humanity was seen as a threat, alien deep space probes had detected something moving between galaxies, not ships, not signals, but patterns of absence. Entire star systems going silent in perfect sequence, civilizations erased without debris, without battle, as if consumed by something that left nothing behind. The Empire had kept this knowledge secret to avoid panic, but the royal bloodline had known, and she believed that traditional strength would not be enough to face such an unknown force. They needed unpredictability. They needed the adaptability that humans carried in their blood. She turned toward Eren and said plainly that if the galaxy was about to change, she intended to ensure her empire survived it, and that survival might require becoming something new. Eren absorbed this quietly, but he did not let the moment pass without challenge. He told her that humans did not adapt because they were superior. They adapted because they were often cornered, pressured, divided, and that if the Empire continued to treat humanity as conquered subjects rather than partners, it would push them into becoming exactly the kind of enemy it feared. His words were not angry. They were measured, and that calm honesty unsettled her more than rebellion would have. Before she could respond, The chamber lights shifted to emergency amber, not from within the flagship, but from long-range communication feeds. An alert from the outer colonies, human resistance forces had regrouped far faster than predicted. A cluster of ships had launched coordinated strikes on supply depots at the edge of Imperial territory, not large enough to threaten the core systems, but precise enough to disrupt trade routes and prove that Earth had not surrendered. The nobles seized on the news instantly, broadcasting statements that the human inside the palace was signaling the rebels, that his presence emboldened them, that the assassination attempt had been justified after all. Propaganda streams flooded the internal networks. Carefully edited images of Aaron in chains contrasted with images of burning alien outposts, implying betrayal, and within hours public opinion across several core worlds began to shift. The hidden war was no longer contained to whispers in corridors. It had entered the information channels, shaping perception before facts could catch up. Aaron felt the pressure tighten, because he knew the resistance commanders on Earth would never surrender simply because he was alive. They did not even know his current status. Yet his existence was now being used as both weapon and shield. The princess convened a restricted council, excluding several major houses, a bold move that signaled fracture rather than unity. And during that tense gathering, a revelation surfaced that changed everything. Encrypted data logs showed that moments before the assassination attempt, a transmission had been sent from within the royal command structure to an external fleet loyal to one of the oldest noble houses, meaning the attack had been coordinated with off-ship forces ready to move if the princess had fallen. This was not an isolated act. It was the first phase of a larger coup designed to reshape the empire back into rigid tradition. With the human question erased permanently, silence filled the chamber as the implications settled. The empire stood on the edge of internal war, while facing an external human resistance that was growing more strategic by the day. And beyond both conflicts loomed the unknown force in deep space that had already erased other civilizations. The princess finally looked at Aaron with a gaze that carried no superiority now, only urgency, and she asked him a question that would have been unthinkable days earlier. If humanity were given a choice between revenge and alliance, which would it choose? Aaron answered honestly that humans were divided. Some would seek revenge. Some would seek peace, but all would fight if cornered. And right now, both species were cornered by fear. As alarms continued to pulse from distant sectors reporting minor but coordinated disruptions, Captain Aaron Vale understood that the hidden war was no longer hidden. It was unfolding across fleets, across networks, across hearts and bloodlines. And in this silent storm of shifting loyalties, one truth became clear. Whoever controlled the narrative of human blood would control the future of the Empire, and possibly the survival of both their species. The Empire did not announce a state of emergency, but everyone felt it. Fleets were repositioned under the excuse of routine patrol adjustments. Communication channels were restricted in the name of security, and entire noble houses began recalling their private forces to core systems, preparing for something none of them wanted to name openly. Captain Aaron Vale stood beside the alien princess in the strategic command chamber as holographic star maps shifted constantly, red markers flashing, where human resistance cells had struck again, not with brute force, but with precision, targeting fuel depots, relay stations, and unmanned resource platforms, avoiding civilian centers, sending a clear message that this was not random revenge, but organized retaliation. The alien generals were unsettled not by the scale of the attacks, but by their intelligence. Someone was predicting Imperial supply patterns with alarming accuracy, and eyes slowly turned toward the human inside the palace. Whispers growing louder that he was somehow guiding the resistance. Though he had no access to external transmissions, the princess faced mounting pressure from the War Council. A final vote was being prepared, a motion to authorize complete eradication protocols against human territories, not just military targets, but planetary infrastructure, a decisive strike to ensure humanity never rose again. And the council demanded the princess support it to prove her loyalty. The choice placed before her was simple in words, but heavy in consequence. Preserve imperial unity by condemning Earth, or risk civil fracture by opposing total war. Aaron watched her closely, understanding that whatever she decided would shape not only the Empire, but the perception of humanity for generations. Before the council session began, she entered his chamber alone once more, the glow of distant stars reflecting off the walls. Her expression calm, yet strained. She told him plainly that if she supported the eradication vote, his life would be spared publicly as a symbol of imperial mercy, but Earth would burn. If she opposed it, she might lose her claim to the throne, possibly her life, and the Empire could fracture into open civil war. She asked him directly what a human commander would choose in such a moment. Aaron did not answer immediately. He walked to the transparent wall and looked at the silent stars, thinking of Earth's oceans, of the fleet that had burned defending a world that still stood. And then he spoke with quiet clarity. He said humans had survived not because they were stronger, but because they refused to surrender their future completely. Even when defeat seemed certain, if the Empire destroyed Earth now, it might win the present, but create an enemy that would never stop adapting, never stop rebuilding. But if it offered alliance, true alliance, not submission, then perhaps both species could face the unknown threat in deep space together. He warned her that humans would not accept chains disguised as partnership, and that any peace built on fear would collapse quickly. His words were simple, without threat or promise, and that simplicity made them harder to dismiss. The council chamber filled with tension hours later as the vote commenced. Nobles argued fiercely, projecting images of human strikes, accusing the princess of weakness, claiming that hesitation now would invite rebellion across conquered systems. Others quietly supported her, fearing that complete genocide would destabilize trade networks and push neutral species into opposition. When her turn to speak arrived, the chamber fell silent. She did not defend humans as equals. She did not apologize for her earlier declaration. Instead, she reframed the narrative entirely. She declared that extermination was not strength, but fear. That an empire confident in its dominance did not need to erase weaker species. She revealed partial intelligence about the approaching deep space anomaly, enough to shift focus without causing panic. And she proposed a conditional alliance with humanity, offering joint defense pacts against external threats in exchange for recognition of sovereignty. Gasps spread through the chamber. This was not compromise. It was transformation. The vote fractured instantly. Several noble houses withdrew their support from the throne, declaring her vision reckless, while others shifted to her side, seeing opportunity in shared technology and unpredictable human strategy. Before the vote could finalize, an urgent alert cut through the chamber. Outer defense platforms reported unknown signatures at the edge of the system. Not human, not imperial, something else, something massive and silent, moving without energy missions detectable by standard scans. The room froze as raw sensor data streamed across the displays. Entire scout fleets had gone dark along the frontier where the anomaly had last been predicted, and now it was closer than anyone had calculated. The argument about Earth seemed suddenly small compared to the approaching void. The princess turned toward Aaron slowly, her earlier question hanging unspoken between them. Revenge or alliance, fear or evolution. The council's division no longer theoretical, but dangerously real. Because whatever that silent force was, it would not care about bloodline purity or political tradition. It would care only about survival. And in that moment, the choice she faced was no longer about saving her throne or sparing Earth. It was about whether two divided species could stand together before something that erased entire civilizations without leaving even ashes behind. And as the sensor displays flickered with readings that defied known physics, Captain Aaron Vale understood that the decision made in this chamber would determine not just the fate of Earth or the Empire, but whether human blood and alien blood would flow separately into extinction or merge in time to face the darkness. Approaching their stars, the unknown force did not arrive with war horns or blazing weapons. It arrived with silence. Entire defense platforms at the edge of the system went dark one by one, not exploding, not transmitting distress calls, simply vanishing from every sensor grid as if erased from existence. And for the first time in centuries, the alien empire felt something it had not felt since its earliest wars: uncertainty. The divided council no longer argued about humans. They stared at the tactical display as massive regions of space turned into blank voids where fleets had once patrolled. Captain Aaron Vale stood beside the alien princess as emergency commands rippled outward, ships forming defensive formations that suddenly looked fragile against an enemy no one could see clearly. Long-range probes sent toward the anomaly transmitted only distorted gravity readings before cutting out, and then the first visual contact appeared. Not a ship, but a shifting distortion in space itself, like reality. Folding inward, consuming light rather than reflecting it, panic began to spread across civilian networks despite censorship attempts. And nobles who had demanded Earth's destruction hours earlier now demanded immediate retreat to core systems, abandoning outer colonies to save themselves. The princess stepped forward in the command chamber and made her choice publicly before hesitation could fracture her authority further. She declared a unified defense pact with humanity effective immediately, broadcasting the message not only to Imperial worlds but toward Earth itself. Offering full strategic alliance against the approaching extinction event, some nobles attempted to override her transmission, but loyal officers secured the channel long enough for the declaration to spread beyond recall. On Earth, the message was received with shock and suspicion, but human resistance leaders recognized the urgency in the data attached to it. Sensor logs, gravitational distortions, evidence that this threat was not a political trick. And within hours, an unprecedented event occurred. Human fleets that had been striking Imperial supply lines redirected course toward the outer system. Not to attack, but to reinforce. Aaron coordinated with both sides, bridging communication gaps, translating tactics, explaining human improvisational combat methods to alien admirals who had never fought an enemy that did not follow predictable physics. When the first wave of the anomaly reached the outer defense ring, it did not fire weapons. It simply passed through ships, and those ships collapsed inward as if crushed by invisible pressure, their matter compressed and swallowed into the distortion. Traditional shields failed instantly. Energy blast dispersed without impact. The Empire's strongest weapons meant nothing against something that did not behave like a conventional force. And in that terrifying moment, adaptability became the only advantage left. Aaron proposed a desperate strategy drawn from human experimental physics, using unstable micro-jump drives to create rapid gravitational interference patterns around the distortion. Not to destroy it, but to destabilize its cohesion. Alien engineers hesitated at the risk, but there was no safer alternative. Hybrid task forces formed quickly, human pilots executing unpredictable maneuvers, while alien capital ships provided synchronized power surges calculated with precision beyond human capability. The combined assault did not destroy the anomaly outright, but it slowed its advance, forcing it to fragment slightly under shifting gravity fields, buying time, precious time. And that small success ignited something powerful across both fleets: not pride, not dominance, but shared survival. Side by side, alien and human crews worked without hesitation, adapting strategies in real time, merging logic with instinct, until finally the distortion began to retreat. Not defeated fully, but repelled from the system's core, leaving behind silent debris fields where ships had been lost. When the threat pulled back into deep space, the system did not erupt in celebration. It exhaled in exhausted disbelief, because survival had come not from purity or supremacy, but from cooperation born under pressure. In the aftermath, the political fractures within the Empire did not disappear overnight, but they shifted. Nobles who had opposed the alliance now struggled to deny the evidence displayed across every battlefield log. Human adaptability combined with alien advancement had achieved what neither could alone. The princess addressed the Empire once more, her voice steady, declaring that strength was not the absence of change, but the courage to embrace it, and she reaffirmed her earlier decision not as experiment, but as evolution. Weeks later, within a secured medical wing guarded by both Imperial and human officers, a quiet moment unfolded that carried more weight than any battle. The first confirmed hybrid child was born, monitored by teams from both species, the infant's vitals stable, genetic readings displaying a remarkable balance between alien longevity and human adaptive markers. Scientists stared at the data in stunned silence, because the projections suggested something unprecedented, a physiology capable of responding to environmental stress with accelerated neural and cellular adjustments beyond either parent species alone. When the princess held the child for the first time, she did not speak of conquest or legacy. She simply looked toward Aaron and acknowledged that this future had not been born from victory in war, but from the decision to refuse extinction together. Across the galaxy, news of the Alliance and the shared defense spread rapidly, reshaping perceptions of humanity from reckless upstarts to essential partners in survival. And though the unknown force still lurks somewhere beyond mapped space, watching perhaps, waiting perhaps, it had encountered something new in this corner of the stars, not two divided civilizations competing for dominance, but a unified front shaped by conflict and strengthened by adaptation. Captain Aaron Vale stood once more before a reconstructed throne, no longer in chains, no longer a prisoner, but a symbol of a turning point in galactic history. And as he listened to the steady heartbeat of the child who carried both alien brilliance and human resilience, he understood that the true power of blood was not in its purity, but in its capacity to change. And in a galaxy where even stars could vanish without warning, change was the only form of immortality any species could claim.